It feels strange to be back in this town after so many years. A part of me dreaded the journey. But I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. As the train pulls into the small station, the landscape opens up before me, revealing the familiar streets of my aunt's beloved town. Nestled between patches of forest and winding, sleepy roads. There's a comfort here. But a restlessness too, like this place is caught in a time warp. And in the center of it all, just a few blocks from the station, stands my Aunt Hattie's antique shop. Aunt Hattie's shop was more than just a building, it was a second home. When I was a kid, my parents would send me here every summer. And I'd spend months wandering its aisles, listening to the stories behind each relic she collected. The store had this otherworldly charm, a mix of nostalgia and magic. Like every object on the shelves held a little piece of someone's life. It wasn't a business to Aunt Hattie, it was her life's work. Her sanctuary. And I was her loyal apprentice, soaking up every story, every fragment of history she lovingly preserved. It's been 3 weeks since she passed. And it still doesn't feel real. She was in her 80s. Sure. But she had that indestructible spirit. The kind that made you believe she'd live forever. Yet, here I am, called back for the reading of her will. Along with my siblings. They see Aunt Hattie's legacy differently. Where I see memories and love, they see dollar signs. I tug my suitcase up the steps to the little inn where I'll be staying and settle into my room. The walls are lined with faded floral wallpaper. And the room has that faint smell of cedar and mothballs. Somehow, it suits the trip's mood, a little shabby, a little worn, but filled with history. I sink into the bed, exhaling the exhaustion of travel. But it's not long before my thoughts drift back to Hattie. To that shop. To all it meant to her, and all it meant to me. My siblings, on the other hand, don't seem to understand. My older brother, Nathan, was always the pragmatist. He's done well for himself, working as an executive in some glossy office tower. The kind where they track stock prices and deal in 6-figure bonuses. My younger sister, Miranda, lives on the other end of the spectrum, glamorous, social, always with a new wardrobe, a new style, and a new set of friends. To them, the antique shop is a forgotten relic. Something quaint, outdated. They don't see the value in it because they never looked past the dusty shelves. I feel that tightening knot of dread in my stomach. That familiar anxiety bubbling up as I realize what this trip will really be about. I'm not here to grieve with my siblings. I'm here to battle for a legacy. The day of the will's reading arrives. And I find myself walking towards the attorney's office, feeling like a child again, clutching at my memories for strength. I enter the waiting room to find Nathan and Miranda already there, both looking more impatient than somber. Nathan is tapping away on his phone, glancing at his watch every few minutes. Miranda is flipping through a glossy magazine, barely acknowledging my arrival. I settle into a chair across from them, feeling the weight of the silence. After a while, the attorney ushers us into a small conference room. It's a modest space, with wooden paneling and a large table at the center. We take our seats, and the attorney begins by offering a few kind words about Aunt Hattie. He doesn't linger on her memory for long, though, quickly moving on to the task at hand. And then, it comes the announcement. Aunt Hattie has left the shop to the 3 of us jointly, with a simple instruction to make a decision together about its future. Nathan raises an eyebrow, and I can already see the calculations beginning in his mind. Miranda looks vaguely interested, though more out of curiosity than genuine emotion. And me? I'm holding my breath, feeling as though a weight has been dropped on my shoulders. In a few sentences, the attorney has laid out the terms. We are to decide together, as a family, whether to keep the shop or to sell it. Aunt Hattie's words in the will are short but powerful, urging us to consider the shop's legacy and its place in our lives. But there's no clause to prevent a sale. Nothing that would stop us from cashing out if that's what we choose. It doesn't take long for Nathan to speak up. Well, he begins, barely pausing to look at me. It seems like a no-brainer. The property's worth quite a bit. We'd be wise to sell it while the market's hot. Miranda nods along, looking almost relieved. Yeah. I mean, it's not like any of us live around here. Right? And I don't think any of us are planning to run a dusty old shop. The words sting. But I say nothing. I'm just staring down at my hands. Feeling a surge of something: anger. Sadness. I don't even know. All I can think about is Aunt Hattie and the hours we spent together. Dusting the shelves. Carefully arranging each piece. Listening to her stories. To them, it's just a building. A property that's worth something. To me, it's a life's work. Her life's work. I sit there, listening to them talk numbers and logistics. As if they're discussing a stock portfolio. And it takes every ounce of strength not to interrupt. I'm here to say goodbye to the woman who practically raised me. Who shared her passion with me. Who taught me that every object has a story. And all they see is dollar signs. By the end of the meeting, I feel utterly defeated. The attorney's words are like a blur. Formalities I can barely process. As we leave, Nathan and Miranda barely look back. They're too busy making plans. Calling real estate agents. Moving ahead with their exit strategy. I watch them walk away. Feeling a weight on my chest. A silent promise forming in my mind. I can't let them erase her legacy. I can't let them take away the one piece of Aunt Hattie that still feels alive. And so, with a mixture of resolve and fear, I make a decision of my own. I'll fight for the shop. Even if it means facing my siblings' greed. Even if it means standing alone. It didn't take long for my siblings' excitement over the shop's market value to turn into a full-fledged campaign to sell. Nathan and Miranda spent the next few days in town contacting real estate agents, researching nearby property values, and even making preliminary lists of developers they thought would be interested. They saw the antique shop as a burden to unload. A way to quickly line their pockets and leave this old-fashioned town in the past. Every time I saw them chatting eagerly about sale prices, I felt the distance between us grow. One evening, we sat together in the inn's dining room. Nathan had just hung up the phone. His eyes gleaming. He turned to me with a persuasive grin. The kind he probably used in his boardroom to get what he wanted. "Grace," he said smoothly. "We have a golden opportunity here. The property value has appreciated over the years. We'd be fools not to cash in. Just think of what we could do with the money." He looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to agree. But I felt the bile rise in my throat. I knew I had to say something. "I don't see it as just a piece of property, Nathan," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Aunt Hattie's legacy. It meant everything to her." Miranda rolled her eyes, her hand playing with her phone. "Come on, Grace. She's gone now. It's just stuff. And honestly, don't you think Aunt Hattie would want us to use that money to move forward with our lives? We're not little kids anymore." Their words stung. But I didn't argue further. I knew my siblings wouldn't see things from my perspective. They couldn't understand why a shop full of stuff meant so much to me. Why I was willing to hold on to it even if it meant letting go of a significant financial windfall. For them, money was freedom and opportunity. For me, keeping the shop felt like honoring Aunt Hattie's memory. A way to keep a piece of her with me. As I returned to my room that night, I felt conflicted and frustrated. The pressure mounting with each passing day. I knew if I didn't take action, Nathan and Miranda would push the sale through. Whether I agreed or not, I decided I had to spend time in the shop. To remind myself why I was fighting so hard to keep it. The following morning, I unlocked the shop's door and stepped inside. The familiar creak of the floorboards greeting me like an old friend. The scent of cedar and age hung in the air, mingling with a faint hint of lavender from the sachets Aunt Hattie used to tuck into corners. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows, casting a soft, ethereal glow over the shelves of artifacts. As I wandered through the aisles, memories washed over me. There was the old gramophone in the corner. The same one Aunt Hattie would wind up to play scratchy jazz records in the afternoons. I could almost hear the faint echoes of music from those endless summer days. The soft hum of her voice as she hummed along. A wave of nostalgia washed over me. So vivid it was like stepping back in time. I found myself reaching out to touch the objects on the shelves, a fragile porcelain doll with a cracked face, A faded leather-bound book with pages so delicate they seemed to whisper with age. Every item in the shop had a story. A history that Aunt Hattie had carefully preserved. These weren't just random objects, they were tokens of lives lived. Memories captured in physical form. And to me, each one held a fragment of Aunt Hattie's spirit. In a quiet moment, I knelt by an old steamer trunk at the back of the store. The kind used by travelers in the days before suitcases with wheels. Aunt Hattie had told me once that it belonged to a woman who'd traveled across the country by train, bringing only her most cherished possessions. She'd never married, preferring a life of adventure and freedom over one bound by societal expectations. I remember how Aunt Hattie's eyes had sparkled when she told me that story. A hint of pride in her voice. As though she saw herself reflected in that trunk. Sitting there, tracing my fingers over the worn leather, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just an antique shop. It was a living testament to the people who had come before. A place where stories lingered and memories were preserved. I couldn't let it be destroyed for the sake of profit. This was Aunt Hattie's legacy. And it was worth fighting for. As the days passed, the tension between my siblings and me grew thicker. Like a storm gathering on the horizon. Nathan and Miranda were growing impatient, pushing harder and harder for a sale. Every time I brought up my desire to keep the shop, they countered with cold, hard logic. We're talking about a significant sum of money here, Grace, Nathan said one afternoon, his tone tinged with exasperation. You can't seriously want to let that go. Think of all the things you could do. You could buy your own house. Start a business, anything you wanted. Why would you want to cling to this old place? Because it's not just a place, Nathan, I replied, my voice rising despite myself. This shop meant everything to Aunt Hattie. It's full of memories, her memories. Our family's history. Selling it feels like erasing her life. Miranda sighed. Her expression one of thinly veiled annoyance. Grace. Aunt Hattie is gone. She's not here to care about any of this. You're just being sentimental. Their words felt like daggers. Each one cutting into the heart of what mattered to me. To them, sentimentality was a weakness. Something to be discarded in favor of financial gain. But to me, it was what made life meaningful. This shop wasn't just a collection of things, it was a place where Aunt Hattie's spirit lived on. Where I could still feel her presence. As the arguments continued, I felt myself growing increasingly isolated. Nathan and Miranda spoke as though they were on one side. A united front. While I was the odd one out. Clinging to my sentimental ideals. The more they pushed, the more determined I became to protect the shop. Even if it meant standing alone. One evening, feeling overwhelmed by the pressure and the arguments, I found myself sitting in the back room of the shop. Surrounded by boxes of Aunt Hattie's old journals, letters, and personal belongings. I opened one of her journals, hoping to find solace in her words. To feel her presence with me in that moment of despair. As I flipped through the pages, one entry caught my eye. In her familiar, looping handwriting, Aunt Hattie had written about the founding of the shop. How she had saved every penny to make her dream a reality. She'd poured her heart into this place, believing that preserving history and giving people a chance to connect with the past was a worthwhile endeavor. I read her words over and over, feeling a renewed sense of purpose with each line. A particular passage stood out to me. This shop isn't just a place to make money. It's a refuge. A sanctuary for those who feel like they don't quite fit into the modern world. It's a reminder that we are all part of something bigger. That our lives are woven together through time. Reading those words, I realized that Aunt Hattie had seen herself as a guardian of stories. A custodian of memories. She had believed that her work mattered. That it gave people a sense of connection and continuity. I couldn't let her vision be swept away in a tide of greed and indifference. This wasn't just about me, it was about honoring the life she had built. The dream she had poured her soul into. With a renewed sense of determination, I closed the journal and rose to my feet. I knew that standing up to Nathan and Miranda wouldn't be easy. They were focused on profit. On moving forward without looking back. But I had to try. I had to fight for Aunt Hattie's legacy. For the memories she had entrusted to me. I would do whatever it took to keep the shop alive. In the days that followed, I threw myself into the shop with a quiet, steadfast resolve. I knew Nathan and Miranda were getting frustrated with my resistance. But I had made up my mind I would do everything in my power to save this place. I spent hours combing through the back rooms, sorting through Aunt Hattie's belongings, searching for anything that could help me hold on to her vision and legacy. One afternoon, while dusting off a stack of old boxes, I found a leather-bound book at the bottom of a pile. It was one of Aunt Hattie's journals, older and more worn than the others. I opened it carefully, feeling a sense of reverence as I flipped through the pages. Inside, I found stories I had never heard before, memories that Aunt Hattie had kept private, secrets she had carried with her. There was an entry about a man she had loved once, a man who had promised to travel the world with her. But when the time came, he had chosen a different path, leaving Aunt Hattie to build her life alone. In her words, I felt her heartbreak, her resilience, and her determination to create something beautiful out of her pain. The shop, I realized, was not just her passion, it was her way of healing, of making peace with the life she had chosen. The more I read, the more I understood how deeply Aunt Hattie had poured herself into the shop. It was her sanctuary, a place where she had crafted a world that reflected her values, her dreams, and her memories. She had built it with her own hands, brick by brick, year by year. And now, it was my turn to protect it. With each entry, I felt my connection to the shop deepen, my resolve harden. Aunt Hattie's life was woven into these walls, into every shelf, every corner. I couldn't let it all be erased. The next few days were filled with an unexpected wave of visitors. People from the community came by to pay their respects, to share their memories of Aunt Hattie and the impact she had on their lives. One elderly man lingered by the counter, his eyes misty as he held an old pocket watch she had once saved for him until he could afford it. Another woman, younger, recalled how Aunt Hattie had helped her find a necklace that matched one her grandmother had lost years ago. Listening to their stories, I realized how many lives Aunt Hattie had touched. She had created a place where people felt seen, where they could find a piece of their past or a connection to someone they loved. She hadn't just sold antiques, she had preserved memories and given people a chance to feel connected to something bigger than themselves. For each person, Aunt Hattie had found something unique, something meaningful. The shop was not just her dream, it was a gift to everyone who walked through its doors. I saw it now, more clearly than ever. And I knew I couldn't let it disappear. This place mattered, not just to me, but to everyone Aunt Hattie had touched. I owed it to her and to them to keep it alive. Despite my growing resolve, Nathan and Miranda were relentless. One evening, Nathan announced that he had found an investor interested in buying the property, a developer who was eager to turn the shop into a high-end cafe or a boutique hotel. He laid out the numbers, confident that I would be swayed by the impressive offer. I felt a pang of dread as I listened to him describe his vision. A slick, modern establishment where tourists could sip lattes and browse trendy trinkets. The thought of Aunt Hattie's beloved shop, transformed into something so soulless, so commercial, made me feel ill. Think about it, Grace, Nathan insisted, his voice full of persuasion. This could be our chance to finally move on. Aunt Hattie wouldn't want us to be stuck in the past. She'd want us to make the most of this opportunity. But his words rang hollow. I knew what Aunt Hattie would want. And it wasn't this. She hadn't built this shop for tourists or profit, she had built it for people who valued history, who respected the past. I tried to explain this to Nathan and Miranda, but they brushed off my concerns, dismissing me as sentimental and impractical. As they pressed me to sign the papers, I felt a growing sense of isolation. They couldn't understand my attachment, my refusal to sell. To them, the shop was a means to an end, a quick payday. But to me, it was the heart of Aunt Hattie's legacy, a place that held more value than any sum of money. And so, I made a decision. I would not give in. No matter how hard they pushed, I would stand my ground. With the pressure mounting, I knew I had to take action. I couldn't rely on my siblings to understand. So I decided to explore other options. I went to the local bank, hoping to secure a loan that would allow me to buy out Nathan and Miranda's shares of the shop. It was a long shot. But I was willing to try anything to keep Aunt Hattie's legacy alive. The loan officer listened to my story with sympathy. But when it came down to the numbers, I simply didn't have enough collateral to cover the loan. My heart sank as she explained that without a substantial financial backing, there was no way I could secure the funds I needed. As I left the bank, I felt a crushing sense of defeat. I had tried everything I could think of. But it wasn't enough. I was on the verge of losing everything Aunt Hattie had worked for. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. The realization left me feeling empty, as though the life had been drained from me. But even in my despair, a small spark of hope remained. I couldn't give up, not yet. I had to find a way to save the shop, even if it meant reaching out to others for help. That evening, as I sat alone in the shop, a young girl wandered in, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the shelves of artifacts and antiques. She looked around in awe, her fingers brushing over the delicate lace of an old doll's dress, the worn cover of a leather-bound book. Her fascination reminded me of my own childhood. The way I had once looked at this place with a sense of magic and possibility. She turned to me with a smile and asked if the shop had any treasures for someone her age. In that moment, I felt a surge of joy, a reminder of why this place mattered. It was a space where people could discover something new, something meaningful, something that connected them to a larger world. Watching her explore the shop, I felt my determination rekindled. This place wasn't just an antique store, it was a bridge between past and present. A place where memories could be rediscovered and cherished. I knew then that I couldn't let it go, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. The shop was worth fighting for, and I would give everything I had to keep it alive. With my resolve stronger than ever, I met with Nathan and Miranda, prepared to make my case one last time. I told them about the young girl, about the memories of Aunt Hattie, about all the lives she had touched. I pleaded with them to see the value of the shop, not in terms of money, but in terms of its meaning, its history. But my words fell on deaf ears. They were too focused on the offer, too blinded by the allure of a quick profit. Nathan gave me an ultimatum: either I agreed to the sale, or they would proceed without my consent. Faced with their ultimatum, I felt a surge of defiance. I would not let them destroy Aunt Hattie's legacy. Not without a fight. I made it clear that I would not sign the papers, that I would stand my ground no matter what. They stormed out, leaving me alone in the shop. But I felt a sense of peace, a quiet strength that I hadn't felt in days. I had taken a stand, and I would see it through. Just when I thought I had exhausted all my options, a distant relative reached out, a cousin who had known Aunt Hattie well and shared my love for the shop. She had heard about the situation and offered to help me financially, providing the support I needed to buy out Nathan and Miranda's shares. Together, we developed a plan to turn the shop into a community cooperative, allowing locals to invest in its preservation and share in its upkeep. It was a radical idea, but it felt right. By involving the community, we could ensure that Aunt Hattie's legacy would continue, that her dream would live on. With my cousin's help and the support of the community, I was able to keep the shop alive, transforming it into a shared space that belonged to everyone. Aunt Hattie's memory would live on, not just through me, but through all those who valued what she had created. In the months that followed, the shop flourished, becoming a vibrant part of the community. People came not only to buy antiques, but to share stories, to connect with each other, to feel a part of something meaningful. The shop had become more than just a place, it was a living tribute to Aunt Hattie's legacy. A place where memories were cherished and preserved. As I walked through the aisles, now filled with laughter and life, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had fought for what mattered, and I had won not just for myself, but for Aunt Hattie, for the community, for everyone who believed in the power of memory and legacy. Though my relationship with Nathan and Miranda remained strained, I knew I had made the right choice. I had chosen to honor Aunt Hattie's dream, to protect the place that had shaped me, and to give others a chance to experience its magic. And in doing so, I had found my own path, my own sense of purpose, and a lasting connection to the woman who had inspired it all.